This is George Dionne of the Rock is George podcast, and this is a KNAC.com exclusive interview with keyboardist and guitarist Steve Mann of the UK melodic rock act Lionheart. If I knew absolutely nothing about Lionheart, how would you describe the band's music to me?
I would say that we are a band who come from the 1980s. We play melodic British rock, full of guitar harmonies, vocal harmonies, and very melodic songs.
Absolutely. You have a new album coming out. It's your fifth. It's called The Grace of a Dragonfly. It comes out on February 23rd through Metalville Records. This one, a little different for Lionheart. You guys taking the concept of war and World War II references and kind of putting it into an album. It seems kind of apropos for today's day and age.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a bit risky, especially in the light of what's going on in the world. I mean, we started the album about 3 years ago. And I just thought to myself, how can we kind of take a step forward with this album? And just make it a little bit different to what we've done so far, rather than just doing yet another album of melodic rock songs. And so I mentioned, how about we do a themed album or concept album, as they used to be called. Lee loved the idea, and he said, he said, I would love to do it about World War II. And he has a kind of, not a fascination, but a real interest in anything to do with World War II. So I said, okay, that's great. I said, we have to remember, that we do not want to glorify war in any way whatsoever. I made that a stipulation. I said to Lee, we can do this. That's absolutely fine. But let's not in any way glorify it. Let's not make it a British or an Allies thing that, hooray, we won the Second World War. Anything like that. Let's stick to the more human side of war and examine the stupidity of it, and I said, as long as the album, and the lyrics for me convey the feeling that war is not the way to go, is not the way to solve the world's problems. The way to solve the world's problems is through discussion and sitting down around a table. And so I made that very, very clear. And so Lee, I think, kind of kept that very uppermost in his mind when he was writing the lyrics. And I think he did a great job. I think it's come out really, really well. I think it's conveyed that feeling that war actually is a complete and utter waste of time and waste of life.
I think you put the concept together well, and you even kept it within, your melodic rock sound, and it never gets boring. It never gets boring. Some concept albums can draw on because you're trying to keep a story going and you forget about the music, but you guys made it work. Are you a World War II buff yourself, or is it really just Lee?
It's Lee and a little bit Clive. I think Clive is a bit of a World War II buff as well. I most certainly am not. I mean, my father was involved in the D-Day landings, but he was one of those people who kept very, very quiet about things and didn't really like to talk about it. So I never really discussed it with him. And he died over 30 years ago now. And I look back and I regret not actually having discussed it with him, because I think there was a lot of information in his head that he didn't explain to people. And I wish I'd been mature enough back in those days to have actually sat him down and asked him about, his role and what happened exactly. And I know his landing craft, they had an accident. They hit a mine, and the craft broke in two, and they had to be rescued. And during the rescue, he lost a leg, and that's all I knew about him. And so that's really the limit of my connection to World War II. I find thoughtful films like Schindler's List, for example, kind of very, very good. I would recommend that film to anybody. But I don't like anything that glorifies it or makes the as I say, the British or the Allies the big heroes and all of this. I just don't think that's how war really is.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about some of the songs on the album. Your first single is Flight 19. what's kind of the story behind Flight 19?
That's the one that doesn't quite fit into the World War II scenario, but that took place. That's an event, a true event that took place at the end of 1945 in December, and five US bombers were on a training mission, and they flew out over the Bermuda Triangle and completely and utterly disappeared. And to this day, they've never found any trace of those planes. They thought they had a couple of years ago, but it turned out to be a false alarm. And yeah, it's a fascinating story. And I think, again, Lee with his lyrics, I think he's conveyed that story really well.
Absolutely. I know the songs you have coming out after this song, so why don't we talk about them? Let's talk about V is for Victory.
Yes. Yeah, that the title is probably slightly misleading, and I think it's quite interesting that it is slightly misleading because again, it sounds like it's kind of glorifying the fact that we had VE Day and we celebrated our victory. I think it was something worth celebrating because I mean, certainly, I'm not trying to diminish the ultimate aim of World War II, which was to defeat Nazism and fascism. But the song itself is more about the fact that we as a human race are in the process of defeating, hopefully, the whole concept of war and moving forward to a time of more spirituality and peace. And that essentially is what the song is about, that we find a way to actually get past this kind of aggressive phase of mankind, if you like. I mean, we're not doing too well at the moment with two major wars raging at the moment, but that was the idea when we wrote the song, that mankind will transition out of this very aggressive phase that it's going through at the moment.
So one of the songs that I enjoyed that is not going to be a single as far as I know is This Is a Women's War. And, my knowledge of the women's roles in World War II were based on A League of Their Own, where they formed the female baseball team while the men were at war. But I mean, I'm sure you're talking about something a little more important.
Yeah, I mean, the song really is about the role that women played in the Second World War, which is very often forgotten. And they were making munitions at some ridiculous kind of rate, and basically that their contribution towards the war effort was huge. And they were very, very integral part of what happened. Okay, it was the men that were going out to the front line to physically fight the war, but the women who were doing so much valuable work back in the UK, or back in any of the Allied countries, it was a fantastic role that they played.
One of the next songs that's going to be a single is Little Ships, if you want to talk a little bit about that one.
Yeah, that one is about Dunkirk in I think it was 1940, or it was early on in the war anyway. And that's when basically the troops which had landed on the continent, on continental Europe, were pushed back and they were trapped in this area around Dunkirk. And I think there were kind of, over 100,000 or several 100,000 troops who were stranded there. And of course, then we had Operation. Lee's going to kill me. I've forgotten what it was called. But anyway, the operation where they went over to Dunkirk and brought the troops back. And they literally commandeered every single last ship that was available, whether it was little fishing boats or, whatever, rowing boats, whatever it was. They got in there and they went over to Dunkirk and they just filled these boats up with the troops and brought the vast majority of them back again, which was an amazing feat. And I just wish I could remember Operation Dynamo. That was it. I think that's what it was. Lee would tell you, but yeah, that's what that song's about.
Is it difficult deciding as a band what songs you want to put out as promotional singles where you have a concept album here and it kind of breaks away from the theme?
In our case, it is. I think with other bands, maybe there's more of an obvious single, or an obvious couple of singles, or they will try and write a single to go on the album. But we don't do that. We just write songs, and what we probably wrote about 20 songs altogether, half of which we just thought, these are good songs, but they're not good enough. And, as a producer, my role is to determine what goes on the album and what stays off the album. And sometimes it's a bit difficult, because somebody may actually write a song complete from beginning to end, and they'll give it to me, send it to me, and I'll listen to it, and it's just not going to cut it. So I have to say, I'm really, really sorry, but we have to pass on that one, or we can work on it for another album or something. So it's very hard, but it does mean that we end up with an album full of good songs. So it's very difficult to pick 3 singles. So I picked 3, Dennis picked 3, all the other guys picked 3 songs. We gave them points, and then we gave a list of, I think, 5. Oh no, we gave a list of 3 to the record company. They said, right, pick your 2 singles from that, and they couldn't decide, so they just said, to hell with it, we'll just release 3 singles. So, but in our case, it's always difficult.
The new album, The Grace of a Dragonfly, has some fantastic artwork. You guys are kind of known for that in recent days, like The Reality of Miracles back there. Who was your graphic artist for the new album?
We stayed with our tried and trusted friend, Tristan Greatrex. He came in for second. In fact, he contacted me on Second Nature and said, like, I love the band. I've loved your music for a long time. Have you done the artwork for the album yet? And I was so busy putting the album together, producing it, I hadn't even thought about the artwork. And I said, no, I said, that's fine. Just send me an idea if you've got something. And he sent me the lion's head. And I said, that's brilliant. It's just so simple and just conveys somehow what the band is about. I just love the lion's eyes, the expression on his face somehow was Lionheart. And since that day, he's been our graphic designer, and has really been the 5th lion. The 6th lion, the extra member to the band. I'm losing count there, sorry. And so, of course, we went with him for this new album, and I think he's probably excelled himself on this. I think the artwork for The Grace of a Dragonfly, what he's come up with, is just absolutely stunning. And we've had a few people on social media say that they would buy the album just for the front cover. My answer is, we'll buy the album for the front cover and the artwork inside and the music as well. I said, you will not be disappointed.
I got to agree with that.
Thank you.
Lionheart, for the most part, is a studio project because you guys are busy with other bands, and it's tough to get, tour support for all your bands, I would imagine. But is there a chance that Lionheart could play live soon?
Well, we have one gig in 2024. Not quite a full date sheet, but it's getting there. It's a start. That's on October the 11th, Firefest Festival in Manchester. And on the Michael Schenker group front, it's quite thin on the ground this coming year. So I think, if anything, this would be a good year actually to look around for Lionheart to see if we can get some live shows. And it certainly would be, before we do Firefest, it would be really nice if we could, to get a few kind of warm-up shows together. So I think this year could see Lionheart actually finally going out on the road, which would be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of fans that would love to see it. I'm pretty sure it's been a long time since you performed together in the past.
I'm just trying to think when it last was. I think it must have been Spain in 2018 or 2017. It's a few years ago. And since then, we haven't toured for the reason that you mentioned, which is that we've just been so busy with other projects. And Dennis has been out on the road, so has Rocky, and so have I, obviously, with Michael. But I think this year is looking like it could be Lionheart's live year. Let's hope.
And as you mentioned, last year you were out on the road with Michael Schenker celebrating his 50th anniversary. Were there any standout shows for you on that pretty long trek, besides the Dublin riots that canceled your show?
Well, that's actually what I was going to say. I mean, there was one. I mean, every show is a great show. I mean, it's the guys in the band are such class musicians. We couldn't actually play anything but a good show. And even when, the power goes out sometimes, or guitar cable breaks or string breaks, we just sail on through it, and we get by. But there was one particular show, and that was Dublin. And when we had the Dublin riots, we had to cancel the show. We actually went to the venue, or to near the venue, and they sent a van out to pick up our gear, and the gear was taken into the venue and was built up because the promoter said to us, no, the show's going to go ahead tonight. And this is the day after the riots. And then we suddenly got a message from him saying, got to cancel, because the police have said there's now another, how do they put it, like a meeting, if you like, which could be, again, infiltrated by the right wing and could turn into a bit of trouble again. So unfortunately, they had to cancel the show. And as it turned out, everything was peaceful, but obviously, we cancelled and got our gear out again. And we had a day off, which was supposed to travel back to the mainland 2 days afterwards. And this club owner, and I've forgotten what the club was called, but he contacted us and said, if you're looking to play Dublin, why don't you come down on Thursday, 2 days after your original gig? He said, it's small. He said, but we'll pack people in somehow. And, the stage is small, but I'm sure you can manage. And we jumped at the chance, because we felt really bad about having to cancel the show, even though it wasn't our fault. And so we managed to kind of make the stage as big as possible. We got all the gear on there. They managed to pack everybody in like sardines into a can. And it was the most amazing gig. I mean, they just, absolutely went wild. And we absolutely enjoyed it so much because we were just glad to be able to play for them. So I think that was a real standout gig of 2023.
While you were out on the road, you had the chance to join your former band members in The Suite, which actually Lee is also a member of. So what was it like kind of getting on stage with Andy Scott again?
Oh, that was great. It's always great with The Suite. I mean, they're such a great bunch of guys. And again, great musicians, great singers. And I think I played with The Suite permanently for 7 years back in the 90s. And once you've played those songs so many times, you never, ever forget them. It's like riding a bicycle. You never forget how to ride a bicycle. And so we just went down to see them to begin with. And I happened to have a guitar in the back of the car. And Andy said to me, oh, you've got to get up, do a couple of numbers. So I said, yeah, all right. So I grabbed my guitar and I went on stage, and it was great. Absolutely had the fun of my life. And Andy said, look, if you remember the songs, just stay on. Just keep playing the songs. So I just played through to the end of the set. And fantastic. I mean, always a great band, always great songs. And it's always great to see the guys again.
Any chance of a future collaboration with The Suite?
You never know. Yeah. I mean, I certainly don't rule it out. We've had a bit of bad timing. I think when they were looking for a guitar keyboards player, I was very, very busy with Michael. When things kind of got light with Michael, I'd phone Andy up and say, look, I'm available. And he'd say, oh, it's not really a good time at the moment, because the position's filled and everything. And so over the years, we kind of missed each other. But I'm sure, maybe there might be one time when we get to actually do something together again. Would be great if we could.
Now that Schenker is kind of tampering down his time on the road, are you guys going to be working on new music?
What with Schenker?
Yes.
We're just finishing off a new album. I assume that will be coming out in 2 or 3 months' time. I think it's in the mix stage at the moment. So so that will be ready to come out.
Who's singing on it?
I mean, apart from that, I guess I think he'll just keep recording albums until he can't do it anymore. I mean, Michael will never stop playing, and he'll, to the end of his days, he'll just keep playing either live on stage or in the studio. I mean, that's all he can do. That's all he wants to do. And that's absolutely what he's best at. And I think that's what everybody wants to hear too.
Who's going to be singing on that album?
That is Robin is the singer of the band live, but Michael has been working with Michael Foss as producer. And I believe that Michael Foss is taking a lot of the lead vocals on that album. but I'm not 100% sure because I haven't been that much in contact with them as the album was going down. I did my keyboards parts, but I was kind of quite busy with the Lionheart stuff, and so I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that's the case.
So, if I could, I wanted to hit the time machine a little bit on your career. I wanted to go back to 1978 and this album in particular. I don't know if you can see.
Wow. Yeah, I can see that loud and clear. Lovely.
I don't want to admit that I got this in the $2 bin at my local record shop. It's not.
They ripped you off.
Now, how did you end up getting involved with the band Liar back in the late 70s?
Back in the 70s, there was no internet. And the only way that bands could advertise for musicians was in a newspaper called Melody Maker. And that was one of the three newspapers that were around at the time, or maybe four. There was Melody Maker, there was New Musical Express, there were a couple of others. But Melody Maker was the one that everybody used to advertise in. And in 1977, I used to buy Melody Maker every week just to look and see who was advertising. There was it 77 or before then? I think it was 1976. There was an advert that had been put in, as it turned out, by John Lord and Ian Pace and Tony Ashton for this new band they were forming, Pace, Ashton and Lord. And so I went along for the audition for that. And Bernie Marsden got the gig in the end. So I carried on looking in Melody Maker. And then, lo and behold, there was this advert for a lead guitar player. So I went down for the audition and I got the job this time. And that was Liar. And that was in 1977. That was my first professional band. I was pretty wet behind the ears and didn't know what, the whole thing was about. But I learned pretty quickly. They were all kind of a bit older than I was. They'd been in the business for about 10 years already. So I learned pretty quickly. But that was a really good band. Liar was a very good band.
That's actually a pretty good album. I enjoyed it, and it's certainly the sound of the times, I'd say, for sure. What do you remember about recording the album?
Yeah, quite a lot, actually. We recorded that at Ramport Studios in Battersea, London, which was owned by The Who at the time. And that was a beautiful studio with a Harrison desk. No, my mistake, it was a Neve desk. And sounded absolutely beautiful. It was an old church. They left the pulpit where it was in the recording room. Just a really great atmosphere. It was quite small, but it was certainly big enough to get a whole band in there. And John Alcock had just finished doing the Jailbreak album with Thin Lizzy, and he then came onto our album straight afterwards. I thought he did a great job. It was engineered by a guy called Will Reed Dick, who was also very kind of big on the scene at the time as an engineer. And we had I think it was like a 30-piece orchestra that came in, conducted by Fiacre Trench, who was the guy to go for orchestras. And it was amazing, just sitting there watching this 30-piece orchestra playing this background to the songs that you just sat and practiced at home. Suddenly the whole thing just became big and professional, and I was completely blown away by the whole thing. And it was a very early example of orchestra and lead guitar playing together. And John has said to me, John Alcock, just go out there and just improvise a lead guitar solo. And just keep like a rhythm going right the way through. So they had like percussion on congas and stuff. And I just played this lead guitar solo. And then Fiacre Trench took a copy of the solo and he orchestrated around it. What he did was just brilliant, and I found that, where I was maybe playing a riff, he would then echo that with the strings or the cellos. And, it was this wonderful world that he built around my solo. I was just very disappointed with my solo. I didn't like what I played, but I was too young to complain. And John Alcock said, "Oh no, that's great. Trust me. That's, as producers do." And I thought, well, you must know best. But to this day, I can't listen to the solo because I just think what a waste of an orchestral arrangement, with this kind of rather weedy sounding solo. But I would do a better job these days. But back then, it was a very, very interesting experience. But it turned out to be a great album in the end, I think.
You had a brief reunion with Liar in 2020 for Escape Music. You guys released an album that had been shelved back in the early 80s. I had no idea that was the case. So it must have been cool kind of reconnecting with your first professional band.
It was very nice. And we started off by, we met in Harpenden in England at a little pub restaurant. And it's the first time we've seen each other for, 35, 40 years. And it was great. It was really, really nice to have the reunion. We just chatted about old times. And then the idea came up from Khalil Turk of Escape Records, who was had been a Liar fan since 1979. And his ambition had always been to put that album out that was recorded for Bearsville. And then Bearsville folded as a company, and so the album never got released, and it stayed on the shelf. And we managed to get hold of the master tape of it, and so we put it out as an album. And Khalil, as a incentive, printed up I think 500 or 1,000 photo cards of the band, and sent them around to each of us, and we'd sign them all and then send them on to the next guy. And it was literally Paul Travis got the cards, signed all 1,000, and the next morning he died. And it was just, we just couldn't believe it. That was almost the last thing he did before he died. And, we were in shock. We'd already recorded Woman, which was the bonus track of the album, which we decided to record as an additional extra. And we'd recorded that with Paul, luckily. So, it's a nice thing to remember him by. We had the track Woman that he played and sung on, and we have the autograph cards that he signed just literally the night before he died. Clive Brooks, the drummer, he'd also died a little bit before that, so he was unable to take part. But I took his original drums that he played on the demo of Woman, and I reprogrammed them exactly hit for hit. So effectively, it was like Clive playing on the track. So we had an authentic Liar sound on that new recording of Woman. And I have to say, it sent shivers down my spine. I think I shed a tear or two, when I listened to it. So I just thought, this is great, hearing the old band alive in the 2020s again. It's really, really nice.
And the name of that album is Sunset Plaza Drive. It came out in 2020 through Escape Music. And if collectors are looking for it, it's out there in some places.
It's out there. It's probably in the $2 bargain bin, alongside Liar. Oh, it is Liar, yeah.
Steve, are you working on any other music projects besides Lionheart and MSG?
Yeah, I'm working on music projects all the time. I'm doing a lot of stuff for Khalil, and he at Escape Records. And his mission is to basically, I think, get to know every musician in the world and get them on one album. And he's doing pretty well, actually. He puts together these discs called Turkish Delight. And he's on the third one now, I think. And he basically just phones up all of his friends. And, he's got some serious, friends. I mean, we've got people like, Rob McCauley and a whole host of great singers singing on these records. So there's always work to do there for Khalil. There's an album that I'm doing right at this moment by a band called Blind Eye that I was a member of at school. And we broke up in 1975, not having done our debut album. And I got in contact over Facebook with the drummer a while ago. And he said, why don't we try and contact the bass player, who was the third member, who it turned out was now living in Australia, and do our debut album. So I said, great idea. So he got some finance. This drummer got some finance, and he said, right, there's the cash. We've got the cash to record the album, so we're doing it. So it's got to be probably the most delayed debut album. It's actually literally 50 years since we broke up, and we're now doing our debut album. So that's very Pink Floyd style, because that's what we were into at the time. So I think that's going to be a really, really good album. The drummer, Pete Hinton, who also happened to produce the first two Saxon albums, is a very good songwriter. And he's, again, written the concept for Blind Eye, and so we're putting that together right now. So I think that's going to be so watch out for that. It's going to be a good album.
Definitely. Well, those are all the questions I have for you today, Steve. The new Lionheart album comes out February 23rd. It's called The Grace of a Dragonfly through Metalville Records. And I want to thank you for speaking with KNAC.com about the album and everything else you have going on today.
Yeah, thank you very much, George. It's been great to talk to you again. And I always have loved KNAC, and look forward to the next time we can talk.